So that axe was kind of my weapon that I had on me pretty much at all times. It was kept in the trunk. And if I had to go in and check out a property or do something, I typically would bring that with. Now, obviously, you want to be careful. You don't want to insinuate or kind of induce somebody to react to you. So you had to bring it in. It was like if I'm going to a building by myself or something like that, I'd bring that axe for protection, which is still kind of silly in general because it's not going to work against a gun. But it was something for me, at least, to have, a means of protection in some way. And just to recap, for those of you that didn't hear the first episode, I've owned hundreds of properties on the south and west side of Chicago, which are notoriously some of the worst places you could have. And not just that, I've had a ton of C-class apartments with a lot of stories. But anyways, getting into it, when I first went down to the south side, I didn't really know what to expect. I was like, I'm just going to try to dress and act the part and see if that flies. And we just had purchased portfolio properties and I had to go check on this 3-flat that we had down there. And so it needed new keys. So I was going to rekey that. And what happened was I went down there. I was like, okay, what do I need to look like to be down in this area? I was driving a red Chevy Impala, 2004 red Chevy Impala with, I bought this really puffy black coat and a flat billed hat and some jeans and a t-shirt. And I was and some gym shoes. And I was like, that was going to be my outfit. So I get out of my car, I park, I see that there's a hardware store across the street. To get to the hardware store in this bad area of the south side, I had to go over to this corner and cross the street. On that corner was a liquor store and there are a lot of people hanging outside. So I parked my car and I go up to this corner. And as I'm approaching it, I'm getting stared down real hard by the people standing outside. I mean, they were giving me the look, like they want to kill me or I don't know what. It was kind of scary for one of my first few times being down there. So I'm just thinking in my head, I'm like, all right, what happens is your kind of fight or flight kicks in. It's almost like survival. You're like, all right, if I got something goes down, what am I doing? I don't know. So, and so I just kept a straight face. I walked across the street to the hardware store. While I'm in the hardware store, I'm thinking, I'm like, what can I do to just keep myself safe in this instance? So I'm just thinking, I'm like, you know what? I'm going to buy an axe. And I had this idea. So I went and I picked up an axe. I brought it up. I got the keys made, checked out. I don't put the axe in a bag. I hold the axe, my right hand, and I walk out of the hardware. So it's like a hand axe. It's like a little bit of a bigger hand axe that you'd buy at like a hardware store. And I'm just holding on to it. And as I'm walking straight across the street towards that liquor store where the people start staring at me again, I'm looking them dead in the eyes while I hold this axe in my hand and I'm walking right towards them. And I don't break eye contact with one of the guys. And I just keep walking directly at him. And everyone else is looking at me like I'm crazy. And everyone, and then pretty soon they start breaking eye contact with me and they start stepping back. Now, you can't bring a knife to a gunfight, obviously, but they just thought I was a crazy guy. They're like, who is this crazy person? And so they all kind of backed off. And I just walked to my car, put the axe in, and then drove off. And from then on, you couldn't really have a gun back then. It was tough in Chicago. They didn't really have a good way to do concealed carry. It was just kind of, you had to like put a gun in a case and then have it in your glove. Didn't make a lot of sense. And I didn't really, have a way I was worried about having that. So I just never got one, but I was like, all right, I need something. So that axe was now my weapon that I had on me pretty much at all times. It was kept in the trunk. And if I had to go in and check out a property or do something, I typically would bring that with. Now, obviously you want to be careful. You don't want to insinuate that or kind of induce somebody to react to you. So you had to bring it in. It was like if I'm going to a building by myself or something like that, I'd bring that axe for protection, which is still kind of silly in general because it's not going to work against a gun. But it was something for me, at least, to have a means of protection in some way. But that's how I acquired it. It stuck with me for years. That was the way that I kind of helped protect myself. So never had to use it, which is a good thing, but it was there. So I'm going to tell you this is a crazy story that happened. That, this is just part of the circumstances. Obviously, looking back on it, it's not something that I think I agree with, and I wouldn't do today, obviously, but it's something that was a reality back then. And so, one of the big realities of working in the South and West Side is that when you own property down there, the copper gets stolen out of your buildings if you leave them vacant. So, without protection. So, what happens is people will break in. They know it's vacant. They break in. They'll strip all the copper out of the walls, and they do that so that it'll be like, $10,000-$20,000 worth of damage, so that they can get $200-$300 worth of recycling. Or I'm sorry, yeah, they would take it over to like the metal plant, and then they would get, whatever, a couple $100 for it. And that was a scam back then, that these guys would do that. It's crazy how much work they would go through doing to steal this copper to get a couple $100, and it destroys your whole property. This happened all the time. So one of the properties we had got hit, and they stole the copper, and it was a big thing. And I remember it wasn't enough for us to really claim, but it was just enough for us to pay. We had to come out of pocket. And it was like 15 grand. It's crazy. So we had to repipe this whole place. So I had this contractor down there, and the contractor was a Hispanic guy, and he had a method for doing this. I'm like, listen, I need to rehab this now that this all happened. How are we going to rehab this building? Because I know they'll come back and steal the copper potentially while it's vacant. What are you going to do to protect the money that we're about to spend to rehab this? So he looked at me and he said, listen, man, I have a way. This is what we're going to do. It's like, we're going to rehab this. It needs, a bunch of new stuff. It needs new HVAC and needs other things. Rehab this unit. As we're doing it, when we leave, I've got these dogs. I was like, okay, cool. He's like, yeah, these dogs, they don't have any vocal cords. So they had a surgery to cut out their vocal cords, so they couldn't bark. So if someone breaks in, this dog will get them and chase them into a bathroom or a closet because they don't bark. And then that person will be stuck there, and then we can call the cops and come get them. I was like, okay, that's really crazy. It's like, but if we got to do what we got to do, I guess, because we need to rehab this, and I don't trust it. So we did it. We put the dog in there, and we actually had somebody break in a window while the dog was there. And I guess he got halfway in the window, and the dog ran up on him, and he fell out the back and then just kept going or something like that. But he didn't make it inside. So the dog stopped it. So it didn't quite work exactly, but I guess it does work like that, where they run. Imagine a guy just being stuck in a bathroom or a closet because his dog's ripping him up. And then the cops get called. So I guess they've done that before. They've caught people. Other ways that we would have security, we have these pepper blasters, like doors, springs. So like if someone would open a door, it would blast them with pepper spray if they tried to break in that way. And also windows. We had these Simply Safe alarms that we would put in. We had one pepper thing blast someone one time. We had these Simply Safe alarms, were really good. Those were like one of the better technologies at the time. So you could put them on the windows. That's where a lot of people will come in through the windows to break in. And then you just hear the alarms going off like on like a Saturday night at like 1 a.m. They go really loud, and then they record everything that's going on inside. We caught people that way before, breaking in, and so it warns them, and then they have to get out, obviously with all the loud noises and stuff like that. So break-ins were just a common occurrence. You had to have a way to combat that, or else your whole property would get destroyed. And that was just, again, it was like a common thing that happened down there. So we had different ways of dealing with that. And then until you actually got the resident in, you're always at risk, because even a couple of days, if you let it vacant, they'll just come and rip everything out. Even not just the copper, other things too. They rip out countertops, cabinets. It's wild. It's like the Wild West out there. Life in the South Side and West Side is very cheap. You can get killed over a lawnmower, taking a lawnmower. You like things like that. It's just a weird place to be for that reason. Like, man, I can't even imagine like losing my life over something silly, that silly. And that's what exists down there.